Hello everybody. Well, it's that time again. I'm going to put together a new guitar, a partscaster. This time it's going to be completely different though than the last one I did, which was a couple years ago now. I made the Freedom Caster. That was a 3 pickup Stratocaster, floating bridge, LSR roller nut, pretty traditional, sort of a setup. This time I'm inspired by, well, probably about 3 other things. One, about a year ago, my wife bought me the UA Lion, which is like a Marshall emulation pedal by UA Effects, or Pedal Effects. And one of the settings on the Lion is the brown sound. So the Eddie Van Halen amplifier is basically emulated by that pedal, apparently very, very well. What they do with the Lion pedal, and just like what they do with a lot of their pedals, like the Ruby and etc., is they take a component by component breakdown of an amplifier and every little tube and resistor and etc., and see how the settings or the kinds of components affect the overall tone, and then they take that, bake it all into something that sounds pretty much indistinguishable from the original amp. So I have not, in the better part of a year, had the chance to even plug into that effect pedal once. And I think part of what was holding me back was I wanted to use a guitar that was somewhat similar to that used by Eddie Van Halen. I don't want to take a regular Stratocaster and try and make the brown sound out of a single coil pickup guitar. It's not going to sound right. I do have a guitar with pickups in it that are humbucking pickups, but I don't have a guitar that really sort of matches up with Eddie Van Halen's Frankenstrat, his Frankenstein guitar, especially as that guitar existed at around 1980, 1981, when he was using it to record tracks on my favorite Van Halen album, which is Fair Warning. So I wanted to build essentially a Fair Warning type Super Strat. I did not want to build, a Frankenstrat, in the sense that I didn't want to put the stripes on, have the exact same artwork as Eddie Van Halen. You can buy those off the shelf. They're not exactly the same as the Frankenstrat was in 1980-81, but if you want a shortcut and just want to play something that looks kind of like Eddie Van Halen's guitar and kind of functions like it, maybe sounds like it, then that's a great option. I didn't want to do that though. I wanted to do something a bit more personalized, maybe some higher end components, more particular focus on the functionality. And that'll become apparent as we go through the series. So on the one hand, I wanted to have a guitar that gave me the tone of the Frankenstrat circa 1980-81 when plugged into the UA Lion pedal. Also, I was fiddling around playing different bits of the songs on Fair Warning, the album, and for some of these you have to down tune. Maybe it's a whole step, maybe it's 2 steps down, like a drop D or what have you. With a floating bridge, I didn't know this, I only have one floating bridge guitar, the one I built. It never occurred to me before, but when you try and down tune a floating bridge guitar, the springs are pulling against the strings. You might loosen the strings, but the springs on the other side of the guitar are just tightening the strings right back up. So it's essentially impossible to get your guitar to be, drop D or what have you when it's set up for regular, A440 tuning. So I wanted a Strat with a whammy bar again, but not with a floating bridge like on the regular Strats or like on my Freedom Caster. So that was another thing I wanted to change. Something more akin to what Eddie Van Halen had, again, on his Frankenstrat. Although he had to sort of work it up himself with a quarter, but we'll get into all that later. Finally, for 10 years, I was working on a book of philosophy. That might not interest you at all, probably doesn't interest most of the world. But it's an important book as far as I'm concerned. It tells people a new way to look at old, thousands of years old philosophical problems that have never been solved, 12 chapters of them in particular, and I believe, solved them using this particular method. Now, one of the things I did in that book, one of the chapters, was on perception. And there's all kinds of different arguments, philosophical arguments that concern perception, whether it's, what you hear, what you see, etc. And one of the things I feature in the 3rd chapter of my book's called Judge, Philosophy and Freedom in the First Person. In the 3rd chapter, I have, this discussion of perception. And one of the things I'm talking about is illusions, visual illusions. And one of the illusions I'm talking about is called the scintillating grid. Now, when you finish 10 years of dedication to a project like a book, and you just stop writing, the book, there's a sort of feeling like, part of you is missing, like there's a part of your day that doesn't feel the same anymore. And I wanted to sort of reconnect with that book and maybe integrate some of what I was thinking about in that book with this project of a Van Halen guitar. So the way that gets expressed is in the appearance of the guitar. I'm going to be using a scintillating grid pattern as the pattern for the paint job on the guitar. And that means I'm going to have to do the whole paint job myself. So this is going to be a much more in-depth project than the Freedom Caster was. And that's good because I'm learning new things, you'll learn new things from, painting to finishing to wiring to even just selecting the right components for the right job. And some certain little something special I'm going to be doing with the pickup selector. Not to mention a particular piece of hardware that's going to be the pinnacle of this project when it comes to Frankenstrat sound. And we'll get into all that in a future episode. But effectively, I'll just give you a little roadmap for how these videos are going to go. It's going to be a series of videos. At first, we're going to talk about how to paint and polish the guitar. I think it's going to be 3 videos in all. There's going to be different colors of paint. There's going to be taping and technique. There's going to be theory about how you make a scintillating grid on a guitar, because that's not an easy process, trust me. And then how you bring that thing up to a shine, just like you would see on a guitar off the shelf. So about three videos on how to do that. Nice, simple, edible chunks of how to do that. Then there's going to be a discussion of pickups. Now, the pickups in Eddie Van Halen's guitar, especially around that time, there's one pickup in particular. That's a very important part of the sound. There's a fellow named Jim Gaustad on YouTube. He's got a great YouTube channel of the same name. And he has gone through the first 4 Van Halen albums and trying his best to bring the guitars and the amplifiers to bring the sound of each track of each album. So the first Van Halen, second, third, and fourth Fair Warning albums, he's done all of those deep dives on the tone. So with the guitars, the amps, etc. And one of the things he talked about in the Fair Warning video, which is Fair Warning is my favorite album, as I said, was about the pickups that he had. Electronics, from the potentiometers to the switches to the wiring of the switches and the pickups, it's all going to be part of the fun, including technique for, how to get your solder to the right temperature before you destroy your components. Whammy bar considerations, we'll get into all of that, why I chose the whammy bar I did. It's not as simple as you think to find a whammy bar that can check all the boxes. So I'll explain how I got to where I got and why I selected what I did. I think it's going to be an awesome selection. I've never seen it used on any other guitars. It's not to say I have an encyclopedic, knowledge of guitars, but this bridge, this whammy, is not something I've seen used anywhere. So that's going to be fun. Then we're going to get into another video on assembly, where I'm going to put the hardware together. Putting the tuning pegs on the neck, and the neck on the guitar, and the pickups into the guitar, and the electronics into the guitar, and etc. And then finally, we'll do a video on testing to see if this guitar can approximate the sound that Eddie Van Halen was getting with his guitar and amp during the Fair Warning recordings. So that's the project. I'm looking forward to carrying it out. I probably will be videoing the whole thing before I upload any of it. And I hope you enjoy it as much as I'll enjoy making it. So by the time you're watching this, you'll probably have access to at least one other episode, if not all of the episodes simultaneously. Paul McKeever, signing off, and have fun watching and maybe copy. Take care.